Were vampires and zombies not allowed to be in comics? Were the words terror and horror deemed too scary? Was writer Marv Wolfman not allowed to be credited on his works? These are all questions relating to the Comics Code Authority, whose seal could be found on comics for over 50 years. So just what was the Comics Authority? Why did it exist? And what influence did they have on comics? First, it could have begun with Dr. Friedrich Werthmann's 1954 book, Seduction of the Innocent, in which he described comics as desensitizing the youth to violence and crime. This led to several hearings from comic executives in front of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Juvenile Delinquency. Feeling this pressure but wanting to retain some control over their product, the Comics Magazine Association of America, a trade group, formed the Comics Code Authority as a way to self-police their content. To bear their seal, comics needed to adhere to guidelines such as crime never being presented in a positive way, having a general respect for authority figures, not using the words horror or terror in the titles, a prohibition on specific content deemed immoral, and a prohibition of all Walking Dead, torture, vampires, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism. The Comics Code Authority was successful in their censorship due to the fact that comics were primarily sold in newsstands and not in specialty stores. Newsstands and other businesses could not put in the time to make sure their products on the shelves were appropriate, and thus would not stock any comics without the code seal of approval. How did this affect the comics industry? Essentially, everyone played by the rules, avoiding what was not allowed and keeping comics safe for kids. The first big change came in 1971 when a revision made the use of supernatural characters such as vampires, werewolves, and others available, so long as they were handled in the classical tradition of works like Frankenstein and Dracula, or the works of Poe and Arthur Conan Doyle. This produced a flood of characters previously unavailable, such as Dracula, Werewolf by Night, and Blade, along with Morbius, the living vampire. Shortly after, Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams took on the dangers of drugs in Green Lantern Green Arrow, where Green Arrow discovers his sidekick Speedy is using heroin. This story was in keeping with the Code's rules because it's focused on the negative aspect of drug use. The theme of this story is very similar to an earlier one involving Spider-Man's friend Harry Osborn, but his problem was pills. The Comics Code Authority continued to place their seal on books throughout the 1980s and 70s, but with the advent of specialty stores, namely comic book shops, it mattered significantly less. Comic shops could now devote the time to knowing exactly what was on their shelves. Lastly, the prevalence of movie ratings and later video games made the authority's stamp obsolete. In the end, the Comics Code went the way of the newsstand.